My name is Kai Querns and this is a presentation to give an overview of my honours project. This project aimed to investigate the effect that training using a driving simulator would have on a driver's lap time in real life. I chose to investigate this because motorsport is a notoriously expensive sport, and if found effective, this would provide a cost-effective way of training for drivers. Over the last couple of decades, the use of simulators in high-end motorsport categories have become more prevalent, but due to the competitiveness of these series and the money involved, not a lot of research is published by the teams on the effectiveness of these simulators. However, through my research I found that driving simulators are useful tools as they can help drivers familiarise themselves with the tracks. Driving simulators also create a risk-free environment for the drivers to train on, which means they can better find the limits of the car without any of the real-life consequences of things like a crash. But what I wanted to find out is that if these benefits of the simulator would also be able to correlate to an improvement in the actual lap time of the driver. To investigate the effectiveness of these simulators, my study involved participants going to a local go-kart track and completing timed sessions. This go-kart track would then be replicated inside of the simulator and used by half of the participants to train on. After the training was complete, all of the participants would return to the track to complete final timed sessions. After this, we would then compare the times of both of the groups, the control group that didn't train on the simulator and the test group that did train on the simulator, to see if there was any noticeable difference in the times. The first step in this study was to create a driving simulator. To do this, I chose to use an already existing driving simulator game called Assetto Corsa. I chose to use this as it is widely regarded to have one of the most realistic physics of any of the driving simulators that are available, as well as it is easy to mod with lots of resources and help available to do so. To get a 3D model of the track, I decided to use photogrammetry, as with the time available to me for this study, it was the best option to provide a high quality model in a short amount of time. This is because photogrammetry uses pictures to get all of its data for the model. This meant that the model could be created without manually having to gather lots of precise measurements of the track. The track that was chosen to be used was the Scott Cart Cambuslang track. This is a multi-level track that is about 450 metres long and consists of 13 turns. To get the model of this track, I took about 3,000 photos of the track and its surroundings. This many photos were required because photogrammetry requires photos to have a large amount of overlap in order to create a very detailed model. These photos were then imported into photogrammetry software to create a mesh of the track. This final mesh was then imported into Assetto Corsa's in-game editor, which created the mod and placed it into the game. Now that the track was finished and inside of Assetto Corsa, a mod of the kart was also needed. However, due to the time available to me, creating a kart mod from scratch was not a viable option, so instead I went and found an already existing kart mod. I used this Sodi kart mod as it had an indoor kart version, and it was found to be the most realistic in size, look and feel to the real life kart. For the hardware side of this simulator, it was run on a Windows PC and controlled by a Thrustmaster TMX steering wheel. It was also viewed through a MetaQuest headset using the Quest Link feature. Now that all of the aspects of the simulator were ready, a few more tweaks had to be made to both the track and some of the hardware before it was finished. But this is the final version of the simulator and how it compares to the real life lap. As you can see from the video, the lap time of the simulator was slightly faster to that of real life. This is due to some differences in the behaviour of the kart and just in general the track from the simulator to real life, as it wasn't able to be perfectly recreated due to some limitations of the game itself. Now that everything was created, it was time to do the testing. The first set of on-track sessions were completed and all the participants' times were collected as well as head camera footage. Then half of the participants came and trained on the simulator, completing an hour of on-track time on the sim. Some of the participants had issues with the VR headset as it made them feel quite dizzy and motion sick. So if any participants had a problem with this, they were able to continue the sessions just using a single screen to view the track instead of through the headset. The second set of on-track sessions were then complete. However, due to some personal scheduling issues, two of the participants were unable to make the same sessions as everyone else. This means that the visits were split into Visit 2A and Visit 2B. Some variables to note about the second visit to the track was that due to the busyness of the track, there were people outside of the study on track at the same time as the participants. This was not the case for the first one. After the sessions were completed, the results were then collected and the differences in times were then calculated. For this study, we measured the difference between the best lap times as well as the average lap times. However, with the average laps, there are some laps during a session that may be under a yellow or red flag, which causes the drivers to either stop or slow, and there also might be some laps where the driver would spin or have a crash. If any of these laps were affected by these circumstances, it would negatively impact the driver's average lap time, and these can't be considered to be clean racing laps. So to try and negate this, a 10 lap average was calculated, where it took the driver's 10 best lap times from that session and it created an average from them. Once the difference in times between the sessions had been calculated, a t-test was then done to compare the two groups against each other. For the fastest lap times, it was found that the test group had an average improvement of 2/100th of a second, whereas the control group only had an improvement of 1/100th of a second. Although this is a slight improvement, it does not show enough of a difference to be considered significant. Therefore, it can't be ruled that the test group had more of an improvement in their fastest lap times than the control group. And when a t-test was done of the average lap times, it actually showed that the test group made no improvement from the first session, whereas the control group actually had an improvement of nearly 8/10ths of a second. These results can rule out that the simulator showed any sign of improving the driver's consistency or lap time. Using the results from the 10 lap average actually shows an even bigger increase between the two groups, with the test group having a slower lap by about 3/10ths of a second and the control group making an improvement of about 7/10ths of a second. So this again can rule out any sign of the simulator improving the consistency of the drivers. It is also worth noting that on the second visit the track appeared to perform slower, and this can be backed up by reference times completed by other drivers on the same day as the visits. These results show that when measured as a group, there was no significant difference in the lap times between the two groups to suggest that the simulator helped improve the lap times of the drivers. This study did show that individual improvements could be made, as some of the drivers who used the simulator were able to improve their racing line through some of the corners. For example, looking at this reference video taken from a 36-second lap, we can see how this corner is meant to be taken. The driver starts with a wide line before quickly turning in and meeting the apex of the corner before having a wide exit. This is the fastest way to take this corner. Now, if we use this and compare one of the participants' lines between the two sessions, with the first session being on the left and the second session on the right, we can see how they've improved their line. In the first session, we can see that they've taken a much narrower entry to the corner. This causes them to miss the apex and run wide and deep into the corner. This means that they lose a lot of their speed on exit, and this took away any momentum that they had going into the corner. However, in the second session, we can see that they've took a much wider entry to the corner, and this allows them to carry a lot more speed through, and this is a lot closer to that reference line. If we then compare this to a participant that was in the control group who also took a narrow line, the only difference in their line being that they slowed down a lot more to be able to make the corner, we can see that there is no noticeable change in line for this participant between session 1 and 2. There were a lot more changes in racing line noticed throughout the sessions, however this one was the most noticeable. In conclusion, this study was unable to show a significant enough increase in lap time as a whole after use of the simulator. However, individually it shows signs that it can improve the fundamental racing skills of drivers and can be useful to some drivers in identifying areas to improve.